So good afternoon, everybody. It's just about 2 o'clock here now on the East Coast, right outside Washington, D.C. And we're going to get started with our webinar today. This is part of our general webinar series that we're doing both a technical track on Tuesdays and a more general series on Thursdays to discuss various topics around document accessibility. This particular webinar, we're going to focus on how to audit your website for document accessibility compliance. We'll be talking specifically about tools and standards compliance and how you can do your testing. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you have a technical issue and you want to reach out on the chat. Priya will be monitoring the chat during the presentation and can answer your questions, things around dial-in numbers and things like that if you're having trouble with the audio. We've had good success with our Zoom rooms for these webinars, so hopefully we don't have any technical issues. And then at the end of this or during the presentation, if you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A on the Zoom toolbar. And then what I'll be doing is at the end of the webinar, we'll open up the Q&A section and we'll answer your questions and help give you helpful, useful information. So with that, let's get started with our webinar. So I'm David Herr. I'm the Director of Marketing here at CommonLook. I've been working in the accessibility field for probably 8 or 9 years now at this point. This is kind of my second career after spending 25 years in the technology field. And I also have with me Andy Baum, who's one of our senior document accessibility consultants here at CommonLook, who is expert in document accessibility needs and helping you find solutions to your problems. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andy to get started with our presentation.
Thank you, Dave. To any of you who are joining us today that might be new to digital accessibility, don't fret. When I came to CommonLook over 3 years ago now, I didn't know the first thing about this subject either. My prior professional experience was limited to licensed consumer products and managed print services, and I only mention that because, like most of you who are here today, I had to learn this stuff too. And as my wife continually likes to remind me, I'm a work in progress. I'm still learning all the time. And learning about tools that you can use to test your website for document accessibility compliance is why you're here today. So thank you for joining us. And before we get into that, I'd just like to take a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about who CommonLook is and what we do. So who and what is CommonLook? Well, we're all about making the world a better place through digital document accessibility and innovation. We are thought and technology leaders in the field of accessible PDF solutions and services. We have more than 20 years of experience making PDFs accessible to people with disability. If you think about that in terms of the digital age, that is a whole lot of leadership. We not only develop proprietary software products that you can use to make your own documents digitally accessible, but we also provide customers who prefer to have someone else do the work with a document remediation process and capacity that's about as close as you'll get to the elusive easy button that everyone is always looking for. This infographic right here sums up CommonLook on a single page. We are a trusted software provider and PDF remediation service bureau for thousands of clients. We work with organizations in every industry vertical. I mean, if you publish PDFs on your website or you send them on demand to your clients, then you're a potential CommonLook customer. We've created an entire suite of products designed to address the PDF lifecycle. Our tools can help you author fully accessible PDF documents right from MS Office apps of Word and PowerPoint, remediate existing PDFs quickly and easily, or even generate template-based PDFs from live data that are 100% guaranteed compliant with accessibility standards right from the time they're created. In other words, no remediation needed. We also have applications to help you discover and manage your PDF holdings, and we'll talk about those in particular later in this presentation. As a service bureau, CommonLook remediated well over 1 million pages last year. If you do the math, that's more than 10,000 pages a day. So if you've got PDFs to make accessible, we've got enough capacity to handle them for you. And no matter how complex the document, we can get it done for you. Our CTO sits on a number of accessibility boards and directly contributed to the writing of PDF accessibility standards that are recognized internationally, including the chapters on complex tables, lists, and graphs. For those of you new to PDF remediation, those are among the things that make most people not using our software want to slowly pull their hair out in frustration. At the end of the day, ensuring your PDFs are guaranteed accessible means that you're not only doing the right thing for your end customer, but you're mitigating the legal risk of exposure for digitally inaccessible content. I think we can all agree that digital accessibility is the right thing to do, but it's also the law. There are a number of legal requirements, and perhaps that is the biggest driver of digital accessibility. In the United States, there's Section 508 and the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, that are two legal requirements you might be familiar with and that may apply to you depending on your organization. In Canada, there's the newly adopted Accessible Canada Act, and many of the Canadian provinces have their own standards too, like Ontario's Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, or AODA for short. The risk of non-compliance is big because all of those legal acts that I just mentioned are based on accessibility standards. From a web perspective, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG for short, is the international standard for web accessibility and the benchmark for many of the legal requirements. In the US, from an ADA perspective, any website considered a public accommodation could be in violation of ADA if not fully accessible to WCAG 2.0 AA. And the number of lawsuits that are filed for inaccessible websites, including your web-posted PDFs, continues to grow. So something to keep in mind here is that the one thing that every one of these suits have in common, even if they're settled out of court, as most of them are, is that the organization must be able to certify that both its website and its web-posted documents are fully accessible. And considering the current COVID-19 pandemic, nearly every organization's website is a place of public accommodations these days. Therefore, it's perhaps more important now than ever to make sure that your site and its documents are compliant.
Yeah, there's no question that the COVID-19 situation has really kind of opened the door and the visibility of accessibility in so many organizations, because once everybody was sent home and they had to rely on Zoom and they had to rely on Microsoft Teams or these other tools to suddenly try to conduct business, if content's inaccessible, it was just causing a lot of problems. And so we've seen a lot more demand and we've seen a lot more interest around accessibility, and some of the folks that I talked to in the disability field have mentioned the same things, that they're really seeing a lot more push now to make stuff accessible. I mean, even what we're seeing with a lot of the press conferences that the various governors and the president and others have had, where they're bringing in interpreters and signing and stuff like that, because they're now aware that we need to do more around disability. So it's great to see.
Absolutely. Yeah, and add to that the fact that in this digital age, without a doubt, PDFs are the most popular final form document on the web. I mean, PDFs are generated literally from hundreds, if not thousands, of source formats, and making that the go-to format for PDF web posting, or excuse me, making PDF the go-to format for web posting. But enormous numbers of documents are posted every year, and that just continues to grow. As a result, most clients don't actually have any idea how many PDFs that they have published on their sites. And that can make determining the accessibility status of those PDFs an even more daunting task. Does that sound familiar to any of you out there? If so, we'll talk about some tools that you can use in a few moments. So, excuse me.
So with that, we have, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, okay, myths and facts. That's, I got sidetracked there for a moment, my apologies. Yeah, so there are, before we get talking about the tools that you can use, I want to mention just briefly what some of the myths and facts are as it pertains to document accessibility. I cannot tell you when I'm talking to clients and prospects who are just getting started with their accessibility efforts, when we hear some of these things. One of the more common ones is that PDFs themselves can't be made accessible, and to the contrary, they can. even when you have document authors who are creating with accessibility in mind, which is fabulous, so keep doing it. Once converted to PDF, the document is usually short of accessibility and needs to undergo at least some form of document remediation. And many disabilities require the use of assistive technologies, or AT, to navigate online for those users. AT, like screen readers, for example, despite its name, don't actually read the screen. They read the tags, which is coding behind the scenes of the document. If the PDF doesn't have proper tags, then it's not accessible. Adobe Acrobat and Common Look PDF, our plugin to Acrobat, are two tools you can use to work with tags in a PDF. And I'd like to mention here, for the record, that Adobe and Common Look PDF, or I should say Acrobat and Common Look PDF, are the only two techniques recognized by the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C for short, who are the creators of the WCAG standard we talked about recently as tools for PDF remediation. Another popular myth is that as long as you've got a telephone number that someone can call for assistance or an alternative format, that you're okay to leave inaccessible content on your site. That may be true in some instances with some web pages. But with PDFs, that's simply not the case because they can be made accessible, as we've just discussed. And since they're required, or to be accessible 24/7 and at the same availability as anyone who's navigating without a disability, they're required to be published directly as accessible documents from the start. 30 years ago, that myth might have been more true, but in the digital age, your online content has to be accessible to everyone, regardless of ability, 24 hours a day, every day of the year. Let's consider a non-digital example for a moment. Picture someone in a wheelchair going up a ramp to a building. If the ramp stops short of that building, that person can't get inside. Your digital documents are exactly the same. In short, mostly accessible isn't accessible, and it's not compliant either.
So with that, we're going to now talk about what you can do to do your testing to audit your website. And again, the focus is on PDF being that predominant form of documents that are on the internet. There's also can be Word documents and Excel spreadsheets and some other forms, EPUB, things like that. But generally, PDF tends to be the dominant format, and it continues to grow every year. So really, when you're looking at a website, let's take the typical scenario of, let's say, a government agency. So this government agency has their website, they have their HTML, they've worked hard on their web content to ensure that it's accessible, but they have thousands and thousands of PDF documents. And in the case of, let's say I'm applying for a job, or I'm applying for benefits, or I'm applying for something along those lines, I go to the website works great with my screen reader, I'm able to get to the point, and now I have to fill out a PDF non-fillable print form or something like that to apply for benefits or to apply for a job, that kind of thing. That's when you've kind of stopped at the door. That's that ramp that Andy talked about where you get 80% in the door, but you can't get through the door because there's 3 steps before you enter the building. This is the digital equivalent of that. So to do testing, there's really 2 scenarios. I'm a government agency, I got 5,000 documents. And what am I going to do? Well, I could choose some kind of a bulk tool that would scan the website, discover all the content, and then list out what the accessibility issues are for the documents that are discovered. There's several tools out there that do that, and we'll talk about some of those in a minute. Sometimes those are combined with web accessibility scanning tools. So you can scan the HTML content and the PDF content. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. Then the other way to do it, and you can kind of combine these two, and we'll talk about this in a minute, is a file-by-file analysis of the documents. And what I'm really talking about is a QA process. And so many times, perhaps an organization might take this approach. They might use a bulk scanning tool when they're first getting started, scan their website, discover what the problems are, and then start working on resolving that problem, whether that be outsourcing remediation, doing internal remediation of the documents to get caught up to where they're at today. The file-by-file approach is then probably most appropriate for your QA process. So now we're adding new files to the website, and the budget department is publishing the 2020 budget now, or the 2021 budget. Well, that file would need to go to folks who would handle the QA, and they would be testing the document to ensure that it's accessible before it's been published. I think we're getting past the point now of, assuming that when somebody sends you content that it's accessible. Even in organizations that have developed accessibility programs, there still needs to be somebody to do some testing or spot checking to make certain that people are doing it properly and the documents that are being published are accessible. So we're going to talk about the tools that can be used for file-by-file testing. Adobe Acrobat, using their accessibility checker is one, the PAC3 tool, Common Looks Validator tool, and then also testing with a screen reader as part of a QA process. So let's go into this and talk about it. So Adobe Acrobat, or Adobe Acrobat DC, I guess is what it's called currently. So, it's part of Adobe Acrobat and built into the tool that is typically used by most organizations when they first start doing document remediation, is an accessibility checker. So you can open up a PDF, you can use Acrobat to add tags if the document is not tagged. And then once you've added the tags, you can run the accessibility checker, and then the Adobe tool will walk you through some of the accessibility issues that the document has. Perhaps alt text isn't there, or the reading order needs to be verified, or the heading levels need to be assigned. So, the Adobe tool would allow you to make those changes, and it would also allow you to do some testing. There's some issues, though, with using Adobe Acrobat as your only checker. Sorry about that. It does have some false positives and sometimes some false negatives. And you can't use it as your only test of compliance, primarily because Adobe did not design their checker to comply to any particular standard. So you don't go into the tool and say, I'm testing this against WCAG 2.0 AA or 2.1 AA, PDF UA. It doesn't have a checkpoint by checkpoint standards compliance tester built into it. What it does have is it has some general accessibility components to it that it does test against. So while you can add it to your repertoire of things to test with, it shouldn't be your only test. And we see this in a lot of RFPs that come out. They'll ask that, sometimes the only test of compliance will be to use the Adobe checker. And while that's a good start, we would recommend going a little bit deeper than just using that tool. So the second tool that's out there is the PAC3 tool. And this is a free tool that you can search the internet and download. And it's a much more comprehensive test than the Adobe checker. It does test against one of the compliance standards. It tests against PDF UA, which is the ISO's international standard for accessible PDF. So it's a good standard to test against. And it does show you the tagging. It does show you some role mapping. It gives you kind of a screen reader preview. So it's more comprehensive of a test, and the report is more comprehensive by far than what you would get out of Adobe Acrobat. There are some issues with it. You can't do any fixing in it, whereas if you're using Acrobat and their checker, you can do fixing. You don't see anything that's been artifacted. So if content that shouldn't be displayed and read by a screen reader, such as a watermark in the background that shouldn't be read, that kind of stuff is not going to be tested against using the PAC3 tool. And the reports that they generate aren't accessible reports. So if that's an issue in your organization and your QA department has people with disabilities that are doing the testing, they're not going to be able to read the reports that come out of PAC3. So that can be an issue as well. So the third tool that's out there is Common Looks tool. It's the PDF Validator. And it's also a free tool. And I'll give you a little bit of background on why we did this and why we felt it was important. There's a major issue in this industry as far as testing tools for compliance. And there's a number of organizations that are trying to generate standards around testing for compliance. Because there really isn't, a international standard test or certification. There's the W3C standards. And so the US government and Europe and other organizations, government agencies have selected the W3C standards and said, okay, WCAG 2.0 or WCAG 2.1 is what we're going to require conformance to. But how do we know the documents meet WCAG 2.0 or 2.1? And who's saying they do? You know, when you talk to vendors, everyone's going to tell you, oh yes, we do it to that standard. But how are they confirming it? How are they testing it? How can you independently test it against that standard to conform, you know, check conformance? That's a big issue. If you're paying third-party organizations to do PDF remediation work, how do you know they're meeting the standard? Without ways to test it, without using some of these tools to do some testing, you really don't know, and unless you're an expert in it. And even between experts, you know, one expert will argue that how to implement checkpoint 1.1, you know, they'll view it slightly differently than somebody else's view of how to implement that in the tag structure. So what Common Look has done, we've been doing this for 21 years now, and we've always been standards-based. We've always took a look at the standards, so the W3C standards, the checkpoint by checkpoint standards, and then we've tried to build our remediation model and our testing module and our reporting module around those checkpoints so that you can do a comparison of what we're testing against. In fact, we've been told by many organizations that we're too picky or we're too strict. But you know, there's not a problem with being too strict. It means that you're in compliance. It means these documents are going to work excellently with a screen reader because they are standards compliant and they are fully accessible. So what we did is we have another tool called Common Look PDF, which is a plugin to Acrobat that we're not going to talk about today other than to say it's a remediation tool and a testing and reporting tool. So what we decided to do was to give away free to anyone that wants to download it, the reporting piece, the testing and reporting piece. We felt it was that important to the industry that there was a testing tool that could be used against any standard. So WCAG 2.0, WCAG 2.1, AA, HHS, which is a Health and Human Services kind of unique standard that they have that's kind of an offshoot of WCAG, and then PDF UA. So anybody can test against any of those standards using this tool. They're going to generate a report when they're done. It's going to show them checkpoint by checkpoint where their document passes or fails and exactly where it passes or fails. It lets you see the content that's been tagged. It lets you see the content that's been untagged. And as I said earlier, like an artifact wouldn't be tagged because there's no reason for a screen reader to announce there's a watermark in the background on a document. It's not to be read. It's just there for decoration. It also shows you metadata and the other components of a properly standards compliant document. You know, the only limitation to the tool is it's not designed to allow you to fix the content. It's designed to do the reporting. It is an Acrobat plugin. So if you're in Acrobat and then you use our tool to do your testing, you can go back into Acrobat and fix your documents. So we're giving you the tools you need to do the job properly. We'd obviously recommend that you take a look at Common Look PDF because that's going to be a lot faster and quicker. But we are giving this tool out to anyone that wants to download it. They can go to our website and use this tool. It's a powerful tool for remediation testing. As I said before, it does all the major standards and it's an Acrobat plugin. And I just wanted to show you a report real quick. The sample on the right here is showing kind of a small picture of the report. So when you generate a report, the validator tool is going to come up and generate this HTML compliant document that, in this example, I won't pick on the agency that I downloaded, but you guys can maybe see it. So, you know, with COVID-19 going out, I've been testing everybody's documents. So when a government agency says, this is my opening plan to open my state, I've been looking at what they've been putting out. And they've all been, you know, I live in Maryland, and Maryland puts out theirs, and I looked at it, and I don't think it was tagged at all. I got this one from Texas, and it was tagged, so I opened it up, and I ran it through our Common Look validator tool to see what my results were. Yeah, it's 64 pages long. There were 154 failures, and then, you know, so this allows you to test the document, and then you can go line by line and see what the issues are with the document. So when I look at this, just starting with checkpoint 1.1, which is basically provide text alternatives for non-text content. So this is alt text. This is, for every image in this document, is there alt text that's defining what that image or graphic is, what meaning is it trying to convey to someone. And in the case of this particular document, there wasn't alt text. The alt text was missing from much of the document. It was tagged, which is a good start, but it wasn't completely done properly. And you can see the various pages that had images on this document that didn't have alt text. And then you can go through each of these and see what the issues are. So that's our report, and that's how that tool can be used for doing your QA. So the final way to do your individual testing of documents is to open the documents with a screen reader. So after you have documents that need to be tested and you've tested them with some of these reporting tools that we've talked about, is actually testing them with a screen reader using JAWS or using NVDA or another similar tool that will read the tag tree and allow you to navigate the document without a mouse and listen to the tags as they're read out. But one of the things to consider, if you build a QA team that's going to be doing testing, what's their expertise with a screen reader? Ultimately, if you have people within your organization that use a screen reader that have disabilities, that are proficient in using these tools, that's probably the ultimate test. Let's say that we're talking about that job application. So you built the website, you can apply for a job online, and there's a couple forms you have to fill out. So you have fillable PDF forms on your website that can be navigated with a screen reader, and they're now accessible and you're comfortable with those documents. Have somebody test them. Somebody test them with a screen reader and make sure they can apply for a job and they can fill out all the documents and be successful in using your content. So testing tools have their place, and then this is kind of a manual verification of the content that you've tested. Now, and I'll hear all the time from people about testing tools, and to be fair, you're not going to hit every single issue with a testing tool within a document. A proper remediation process involves not only using testing tools to test against the checkpoints, but part of the testing against the checkpoints is a manual verification. So whether you're using Acrobat or whether you're using Common Look PDF, you're in the document, you're doing the remediation work, and when you're using our tools and you're following our process, you are stepped through checkpoint by checkpoint, and you're doing that manual verification. The reading order is being looked at by a human with eyes who is seeing the content and saying, yes, this is how the document should be read. The reading order of the tags tree will work properly in a screen reader because it's reading the document in the order that it was intended to be read. When I'm looking at alt text, yes, there is an alt text description, but does it accurately describe what I'm seeing on the screen in that picture? What is that chart or graph trying to convey to the reader? Is that what the description is doing? So those manual verification processes are all part of the remediation process. Testing tools can be used to find those blatant errors, but then when you're doing your remediation, you're going to fix what's left in the document. And then ultimately testing it with a screen reader at the end of that process is going to allow your QA team to be confident that everything you're doing is being published properly and accessible.
And one additional comment there pertains to screen readers is that tools like JAWS and NVDA have user preferences, so that the person who's utilizing the screen reader can do some customization as to how he or she wants to hear the document read to them. And sometimes we'll have people ask us why a particular document we remediated doesn't sound the way they expect it to with a particular screen reader. And the thing is, we don't remediate to the screen reader because the screen reader has different preferences. We remediate to the standard, and then the user can customize the experience with his or her screen reader. So just wanted to.
And that's a huge issue, Andy, because you're absolutely right. A lot of the screen readers have different behavior, and over the years, because there was such inaccessible content out there, some of the manufacturers of assistive technology have said, okay, well, if people aren't going to tag PDFs, then we're just going to read, what we can read from a document, and we're not necessarily going to follow a tag tree that back in the day perhaps wasn't there properly or wasn't set up correctly. So you have some behaviors within particular screen readers that are not necessarily following the standards. Our goal for this industry is that standards compliance becomes the norm. Assistive technology can trust that organizations are following the standards, so they can then write their assistive technology to follow the standards, and then everything's going to work the same on any screen reader or any device. But we still have a little bit of that right now, and we do see that sometimes where people look at a document with a screen reader and say, well, this isn't reading correctly, but it does read correctly in the other screen reader that I'm using, and that's the reason why.
Right.
So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Andy.
All right, thanks, Dave. Yeah, so I'm going to talk now about some of those bulk scanning options that Dave teased earlier. Now that he's kind of gone through a number of the document-specific options that are available for assessing your digital documents. So in the realm of bulk scanning tools, in a general sense, and also those that are dedicated to PDF. I mean, there's advantages and disadvantages of both for sure. On the PDF side of things, those that are dedicated to PDF, among the key advantages are a sharp focus on PDF testing specifically, as well as the ability to generate reports that show your accessibility status. A bulk PDF scanning tool can also provide for a long-term approach to sustaining your compliance efforts over time. Now, among the disadvantages are the fact that a PDF bulk scanning tool represents an additional cost to purchase, license, or subscribe to. Also, there are sometimes compatibility issues with different websites. And from a reporting perspective, not all bulk scanning tools provide enough detail about the compliance status to be really useful. And when it comes to web accessibility bulk scanning tools that also test for document accessibility, that in and of itself is a huge advantage because it offers a single tool for testing your whole site. Other advantages include the potential to realize some cost savings and having one vendor for support. On the other hand, a number of web tools that include document accessibility scanning are weak on the document side of things, and the reports you get aren't very useful. Most just tell you pass or fail without providing any actual insight as to how much work you'll have ahead of you to get into compliance. Moreover, you'll also likely experience some inconsistency in service accuracy and quality among different vendors. So now you're likely thinking to yourself, well, what if there's a tool that offered the best of both worlds? One that has a thorough web accessibility scanning and document accessibility testing with usable reporting to boot all in the same package. That could be a really powerful and valuable thing for you, right? Well, good news. I'm pleased to tell you that there is indeed a tool like that. I can't tell you, honestly, how many times that I have spoken with customers and prospects alike about their PDF accessibility endeavors and had them ask if we could also help them with their website accessibility too. And for the longest time, that wasn't something that we could do. But we now have a strategic partnership with Moncito, and their website scanning tool, which is available from CommonLook, provides comprehensive information about accessibility compliance on the HTML side of things. And unlike the tools that I mentioned on the last slide, Moncito also features integrated document accessibility testing that utilizes the power of CommonLook Clarity. Now, what is CommonLook Clarity, you ask? Remember when Dave was talking several slides ago about CommonLook PDF Validator? Well, CommonLook Clarity is like CommonLook PDF Validator, but on massive amounts of healthy steroids. Moncito's document accessibility testing component has built-in reporting powered by one of CommonLook Clarity's reports right there in the same tool, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But what about other solutions that are out there that claim to test for both HTML and documents for compliance? There are some out there, to be sure. But if you recall from the last slide, there are disadvantages too. Among them is the inconsistency in reporting. Before you decide on a tool or tools that you'll use for website document accessibility testing, you'll want to compare the reports from any tools that you're considering for usefulness to your organization and potential value as well.
So we talked about standards earlier, and when we were looking at the validator tool, you were saying the checkpoint by checkpoint standards. And I think that's really what differentiates CommonLook Clarity from the other reporting tools, some of the ones that are built into the, some of the major web accessibility companies that have web scanning tools, or have added some document scanning capabilities to their products, but they're not going to give you, they're going to basically look and see if the file's tagged, because if it's untagged, it's automatically by default inaccessible, or at least it's not standards compliant. And if it is tagged, they're going to be looking for maybe some, at a high level, some of the issues with the tag structure, maybe looking for the presence of alt text and some other things. They're not going to go checkpoint by checkpoint through all of the standards and confirm compliance. They're just not to that detail level. I'm not aware of any product on the market that is anywhere close to what we do with the Clarity tool.
Absolutely. Yeah, and with Common Look Clarity, speaking of which, on the next slide here, we'll talk a little bit more about Common Look Clarity. You can scan either a URL or a network folder for PDFs, and not only discover them, but analyze them for their accessibility status too. Remember when I said that Common Look Clarity is like Common Look PDF Validator on steroids? Well, it is. While Common Look Validator provides an impressive amount of information about a single PDF one at a time, Common Look Clarity is going to scan that whole site or whole network folder to discover the PDFs that are posted there, compare them against every major accessibility standard simultaneously, and then provide you the ability to report on that information. So once the process is complete, you can report on the collected data in just about any way you want. Moncito has one of Clarity's reports integrated into its tool, but a Common Look Clarity license includes several reports, and each one is fully customizable. Some reports are more general, and others are incredibly detailed. On the screen now is a sample file compliance report. That's one of the detailed reports. It's very much like the information that Common Look PDF Validator provides, but it's presented in a much more user-friendly format. At the top, you can see the domain, file name, and URL information, and then summary details about the particular PDF as they pertain to the standard that you tested on or you're reporting on. When a PDF is fully accessible and conforms to the standard, the document status, which is about halfway down the slide there on your left, will say passed. And the number of failed entries will display as 0. That's what you're looking for with a passed document. 0 failures, 0 warnings, 0 user verifications. But on a scanning perspective, Common Look software is going to look at any field like a alternative text requirement as a user verification. Like Dave was mentioning, we're going to want you to put a pair of eyes on it and make sure that the text that's included is appropriate for the figure that it's describing. And when you're logged into Common Look Clarity, all of these reports are very interactive. So nearly every non-static data point on the report would be hyperlinked. For example, if you're looking at this report and aren't sure what document it is that's being reported on, all you'd have to do is click on the URL up towards the top of the report, and it'll take you right to that page on the website. There's no need to copy the link and paste it into a browser. And any of the other, reports where it shows you a number of failed entries, for example, you could click on that and it'll take you to a list of the failures. And Common Look Clarity also offers flexibility in how it's licensed. It comes both as a cloud solution, which anyone in the organization can run scans on at any time, and in what I'll call Clarity as a service. With the service option, we run the scans for you on a regularly scheduled cycle of your choosing, and then you can log in and slice and dice that data any way you want, as often as you like, and share it with whoever you like. So in summary, the Moncito tool and the Common Look Clarity tool offer the potential to not only wrap your arms around your current and complete web and document accessibility picture, but both of these tools are ideal for long-term monitoring of your web and document accessibility compliance. Either way works too. Both Moncito's included document accessibility analysis by way of Common Look Clarity, and the amazingly comprehensive PDF accessibility reporting that comes with the full Clarity experience offer huge potential for value to your organization's digital accessibility efforts. If you'd like to schedule a demo of either product, you can contact us or visit the product pages on our website under accessibility software, We'll be happy to arrange one for you. So to wrap up, we'd like to share a few best practices with you that you can use along the road to document accessibility success. Wherever you are in your organization's endeavors to achieve and maintain digital document accessibility, if you follow these guidelines, you'll be prepared for right now and ready for what comes ahead. The first point includes a good part of what we covered today. Before you can begin to chart a course to document accessibility success, you have to understand where you are and where you want to go. Maintaining a document inventory that includes the priority levels is key. While every document is important, aided by SEO data perhaps, which will tell you how often URLs are visited on your site, you can identify the documents that likely represent the highest potential for legal exposure if they're left inaccessible. Then you can set your larger priorities. We highly recommend starting with the low-hanging fruit, those PDFs with the highest priority, which will represent the greatest potential risk if left inaccessible. And whether you're someone who's received grievances or been threatened with a suit, or just trying to stay ahead of the curve and be proactive in making your site and its web posted documents accessible to everyone, we recommend getting a quick win by way of a large initial document remediation project. This will ensure the accessibility compliance of your most important documents, and it provides you a considerable head start on mitigating risk too, reaching more potential customers, etc. At the same time, designing your day-forward documents with more accessibility in mind can pay huge dividends, as it can significantly reduce the amount of time, effort, and cost that's required for future remediation. And you'll also want to assess your progress along the way with regular accessibility checkups. And once you achieve full accessibility compliance, you want to make sure you stay that way. So this is where tools like Common Look Clarity and Mancito come into play. Both tools can help you monitor your environment, catch accessibility outliers before they become issues so you can fix them. I mean, we all know in most environments, there are a number of people who post content to the sites. So, it's often hard to catch everything, and that's where these tools can help you, because, the outliers will stand out like a sore thumb, and you can make sure that they're fixed before they become potential risk. And finally, if all this seems overwhelming and you feel like you're drinking from a fire hose and you're not sure you want to do all this work yourself, know that you're not alone. As I said at the beginning of this presentation, I had to learn this stuff too, and I'm still learning. Should you decide that you want to outsource some or all of the document accessibility work, please also know that all so-called document remediation service providers are not created equal. Make sure you do your homework, select a vendor with a proven remediation process and practices, and one who can guarantee the work product that they deliver.
And we're doing some future webinars specifically on that topic, especially in regards to how to generate RFPs so that you can compare vendors equally, on a level playing field and determine, the best solution for your organization. So with that, we're going to go to questions, and I'm going to read off some of the questions and see what's out there. So I have a current question here. It says, I currently use PDF Validator, but unable to generate my reports. I opened a ticket with help, and they tell me they are working on this. Can you tell me it's a wide range issue or just something with my version? I'm going to suspect that that's something to do with your version. We did have an issue with WCAG 2.1 reports not showing up. So what I will do, Lisa, is we'll reach out to you after this, and we will get somebody to get you updated so you're on the most current version. Second question that I have here, it says, to clarify, did you just say that you go back to Adobe Acrobat to fix the issue? And then I would go back to the plugin for Common Look PDF to re-verify. I've been trying that. I've been struggling with government documents, 67 pages to get onto the web. Fix something twice in Acrobat and then back to the plugin from Common Look. Issues are still there. It is a failure of a link artifact which shouldn't be there. It's a number within the labeled paragraph referring to item 16 above. Yes, if you're currently using Adobe Acrobat as your remediation tool, and then you're using Common Look PDF Validator to do the remediation or to do your verification, you would go back to Acrobat to fix the issue once you've hit it. If you're using Common Look PDF, within Acrobat, you could do both the testing and the verification and the fixing all within the Common Look PDF tool. And you would be able to solve that problem either through a wizard, or the tool could take you back to that section so that you could fix the content that needs to be artifacted. What I will do, Cynthia, is I will also send your question over to our trainer so that she can answer your question a little bit clearer if I didn't answer it. The next question says, I use PDF Validator and it says Common Look is unable to open this document. Document structure is corrupt. Who do I contact to get help? You can reach out to support@commonlook.com and they'll be able to help you with that. There's a lot of issues with PDFs in that PDFs, when Adobe turned over the structure to PDF to the ISO, which is a good thing, but everybody has a PDF generator in their software tool set, and some create clean PDFs that are ISO compliant and meet the ISO 32,000 standard for PDF structure, and then some don't, and some create documents that have corruption in them. Our tool does do a check before it opens a PDF document to make sure that the structure is in compliance with ISO 32,000. If it's not, it's going to stop you, and that's probably what's happening with your document. But if you reach out to support@commonlook.com, and one of our support people can help you with that and answer that question. And then the last one I have here, actually I have a couple more. We post PDF and HTML versions of reports. We made the HTML compliant. Are you saying the PDF must also be remediated? No, we're not saying that. That's really going to be something within your organization and within whatever regulations you are under within your organization. For example, in Australia, I know having content in 2 formats is acceptable. You could have an inaccessible PDF, and you can have another version of it that is accessible. Lots of times they'll do that in Australia, and that's around their laws. But that may not be the case in the United States or in Europe or in other organizations. So you're going to have to find out if that works for your organization and whatever standards and whatever legal regulations they are under. Our recommendation is to put one copy of the PDF properly tagged, and then you don't have to have an HTML version of the same content. Which becomes a usability issue for somebody with a disability if they open the PDF and it doesn't work, and then they have to go find the HTML version. So that's another issue. And then the last question I have here is Common Look Clarity just for websites, or is it usable for scanning servers or databases? It's not. You can use it for scanning content that's not necessarily on a website. You can scan files like from a shared folder, or a location where they're at, as long as you can access those locally. That would be something we would need to get the specifics of your application to determine what would be the best model for what you're trying to do. We typically sell Clarity as a cloud tool that accesses websites outside, obviously, on the internet. But we do have some clients that will self-host Clarity within their firewall, and then again, you could then scan folders within your internal corporate network or government network.
Right. There's also the option, depending on your security measures, for protected network folders and that kind of thing, to enter the credentials within the Clarity setup, and then it can, get through the firewall, do the scan, and you can log in then and get your reports. But that's obviously dependent upon your, individual security preferences.
And I've got another question that says, we have customers that are extremely set on using the reading order in Acrobat. Their only concern is that the reading order is in order. How do we convince them that this is not the case? And they also use Adobe's or Acrobat's Read Out Loud as their main screen reader, and they're not using JAWS or NVDA. And how do I help these customers? I think the way to help those customers is to let them know that there's nobody, who is using nobody uses the Acrobat Read Aloud, as a screen reader. That's not the technology that the people that would come to your website or would download your documents would be using. So it's not a valid test. In fact, Adobe will tell you it's not a screen reader and it's not to be used as a substitute for a screen reader. So it's not a good test. It's in the same category as just using Acrobat and running their accessibility checker and saying, yeah, I passed that, so the document must be accessible. It must meet WCAG or PDF UA. So that's really the issue. You know, those are some of the areas where Acrobat just doesn't fully address the standards, and you know, our recommendation is obviously to go well beyond that for your testing.
Right. There's also the reading order within Acrobat, or what sometimes is called the Z order, because the icon looks like a little Z. That's not actually what assistive technologies read. So what they're reading is the tags. So the tag tree needs to be in the logical reading order you want it to be in, and the Z order is not really relevant. That is not what's being used from an accessibility perspective.
Exactly. And I have one other question, which says, do links need to have OBJR in the link tag to be read by a screen reader? And to be absolutely honest, I have no idea. But that's something that Paul Reyes or one of our trainers could certainly answer. So all these questions, what we'll do is I will send them over to our support team, and we will reach out, because I have the names of the people that asked the questions, and we will send you the answers to your questions and maybe a little more detail. So with that, if there aren't any other questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up today. It looks like we might have another question. Okay, one other question here. We also have a customer who uses a read all and is insisting on the Acrobat reading order. The customer has a blind employee who uses read all because he can use it from any computer and not just listen to ones that have a reader installed. Well, that is interesting. What I will do is I will get a little more information on, you know, what our understanding is of the Acrobat reading tool and why, and I'll have one of our tech support people take a look at that, and we'll get back to you on that. I can't answer that any further than I've answered it already. So with that, I thank you everybody for the questions. We will send out a link to the caption video recording of this webinar to everyone that's registered. We do have, as I said, a whole series of webinars, both that general series and then the tech series on Tuesdays and Thursdays. If you're interested in attending any or all of them, please click on our link and sign up for them. We're asking people, if you have questions, if you have content you'd like to see in future webinars, please reach out to us at sales@commonlook.com and put in your requests for things that you'd like to have answered, and we'd be happy to consider them for future webinars. So I want to thank everybody today for attending. Please stay safe and be healthy, and we look forward to talking and meeting you all soon. Take care.